Welcome back, everybody. Settle in, because today, we are going on an absolute journey. If you're driving, if you're out for a long run, or if you're just sitting at home staring at the ceiling, I want you to really tune in right now. We are going to dive deep into the architecture of a meaningful life. We're going to be exploring some incredibly profound concepts drawn from the renowned Vietnamese motivational series, Hat Jong Tom Han, which translates beautifully to Seeds for the Soul. And let me tell you, this collection is not your standard, run-of-the-mill, just think positive thoughts self-help manual. No, this is a masterclass in the human condition. It's a raw, unflinching look at self-actualization, the agonizing beauty of the present moment, the legacies we leave behind, and the terrifying, exhilarating courage it takes to actually live. The central argument we are going to unpack today is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. Fulfillment is an internal choice. It is not an external achievement. It is not the promotion, the bank account, the perfect relationship, or the shiny new car. Maturity, as this text argues, is defined by your ability to accept failure with absolute grace, to live entirely in the now, and to cultivate your own inner happiness rather than waiting for someone else to hand it to you on a silver platter. Let's start right at the beginning, with the concept of maturity. The book opens with this beautiful, almost poetic reflection on the transition from the clinging nature of childhood to the resilience of adulthood. Think about what it means to be a child. You reach out, you hold an adult's hand, and you derive your safety entirely from that physical, external connection. But the text makes this brilliant distinction: there is a massive difference between holding a hand and binding a soul. Dependency is when you use love as a crutch. Emotional connection, true adult connection, is recognizing that presence does not always guarantee peace. The author notes that not every sunny season is beautiful. Think about that. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the weather to be perfect, waiting for the circumstances to align, waiting for someone to bring us flowers. But true maturity is standing in the middle of a barren field, looking at your failures with your head held high and bright eyes, shedding the persistent bitterness of a child, and deciding that you are going to plant your own garden. You have to decorate your own soul. You cannot outsource your happiness. And that brings us to the ultimate battleground of happiness: time. How do you manage your time? Now, I'm not talking about your Google Calendar or your productivity apps. I'm talking about the time management of your emotions. The text presents a philosophical framework that completely rewired how I think about my days. It argues that yesterday is nothing more than a lesson learned. Tomorrow is simply the result of today. Therefore, the only currency of actual value, the only capital you have to invest, is the present moment. Think about your emotional energy as an investment portfolio. If you are spending 40% of your energy regretting what you did yesterday, and 40% of your energy being anxious about what might happen tomorrow, you only have 20% of your capital left to invest in today. You are bankrupting your present. The author suggests a radical strategy: delete the regrets. Delete the anxieties. Take 100% of your emotional capital and invest it entirely into the now. The text shares a personal testimony of a narrator who realized that by simply changing their perspective, their way of looking at the exact same circumstances, they realized they were already happy. Why does this matter? Because we are so conditioned to believe happiness is just over the horizon. But if you can master the present, you conquer pessimism entirely. But what happens when the present runs out? What happens when we zoom out from today and look at the span of a human life? There is a story in the text about a philosophy professor that hit me like a ton of bricks. Imagine you are sitting in a lecture hall with 60 other students. The professor stands at the front and asks, "Raise your hand if you can tell me a detailed story about your parents." Every single hand in the room goes up. Then he asks, "Keep your hand up if you can tell me a story about your grandparents." About 3/4 of the hands stay up. Then, the final question: Keep your hand up if you can tell me a story about your great-grandparents. Out of 60 people, only 2 hands remain in the air. I want you to pause and really let that sink in. In just 3 generations, almost every single one of us will be entirely forgotten. The specifics of your career, the arguments you had, the money you stressed over, gone. Evaporated from human memory. This is the existential dread of mortality, but the text doesn't use this to make us feel hopeless. It uses it to challenge us. If you are going to be forgotten in 3 generations, what is the point? The point is the legacy of your impact. The text asks, will your life be a bad omen, or a shining mirror for those you will never even meet? Your legacy isn't your name on a building, it's the behavioral ripples you send through your family tree and your community. And how do we build that shining mirror? Often, it is built on a mountain of failures. Let me tell you about a boy named Sparky. Sparky was, by all societal metrics, a loser. He failed every single subject in the 8th grade. He failed physics in high school. He was socially awkward, he didn't fit in, and as he got older, the rejections kept coming. He wanted to be an artist, but Walt Disney Studios, the dream job for any animator, rejected him. Now society tells you that when you hit a wall that many times, you should turn around. You should find something safe. But Sparky didn't give up. He did something incredibly profound. He decided to chronicle his own life of absolute failure through cartoons. He took his awkwardness, his rejections, his profound sense of inadequacy, and he put it on paper. You might know Sparky by his real name, Charles Schulz. The creator of Peanuts. Charlie Brown, Snoopy, the whole gang. Charles Schulz's failure became the foundation for one of the most successful, beloved comic strips in human history. Why? Because he knew himself. He stayed true to his talent. He didn't try to be Walt Disney, he was just Sparky. And that is why his story matters. Failure is not a stop sign, it is the raw material of your unique genius. But self-actualization isn't just about professional success or chasing a dream. Sometimes, the most profound legacy we leave is completely invisible. There is a story in this collection about the nature of sacrificial love that is just heartbreakingly beautiful. It's about a little boy who is born without external ears. He has no ears. And as he grows up, despite being incredibly talented and smart, he feels like a monster. He is bullied, he is ostracized, he feels entirely unlovable. Eventually, medical science advances, and a donor is found who is willing to provide ears for a transplant. The surgery is a success, the boy grows into a confident, successful man, but the identity of the donor is kept a strict secret. Years and years go by. Eventually, the man's mother passes away. As he is standing by her casket, the mortician gently brushes back his mother's thick, long hair, and the son gasps. His mother has no ears. For decades, she had hidden her ultimate sacrifice by simply growing her hair long. We live in a world that is obsessed with performative goodness. We want credit for our sacrifices. We post our good deeds on social media. But this story argues that the most valuable things in life are entirely invisible. True love is not found in what is known or shown, it is found in silent, selfless action. The mother didn't just give her son his hearing and his appearance, she gave him his life back, and she did it without ever asking for a receipt. This tension, between what we show the world and what our soul actually needs, is perfectly captured in the story of Jack. Jack is a guy who did everything right. For 16 years, he has been a highly successful real estate agent. He's got the money, the security, the status. But inside, he is suffocating. His job is just a routine. It's empty. Jack has a secret dream. He wants to be a professional chef. In fact, he has an offer to apprentice under a master chef named Giovanni. But he is terrified. He has a family, he has a mortgage, he has stability. How can he risk it all for a passion? The conflict comes to a head when Jack rushes to the hospital to be by the bedside of his dying mother. He confesses his dilemma to her, the fear of losing his financial security versus the agony of his unfulfilled passion. And his dying mother looks at him and quotes the poet John Greenleaf Whittier, asterisk, "Of all the words of tongue or pen, the saddest are these. It might have been." Asterisk. She tells her son that seeking happiness is not selfish. Living a life of quiet desperation and regret is a far greater risk than failing at a new venture. Think about the logical flow here. We pursue success to feel fulfilled, but when success lacks passion, it becomes a prison. It takes facing mortality, staring at death through his mother, for Jack to realize that playing it safe is actually the most dangerous thing you can do. Not taking a risk is the biggest risk of all. Now I want to pivot from our internal struggles with success and passion, and talk about how we view the world around us. Because how we judge others is a direct reflection of our own internal maturity. There is a deeply moving story in the second chunk of this text called the wheat flour glue lesson. The narrator, as a young kid, goes over to visit a friend they call Min, the Fat. The narrator walks into Min's house and is horrified to see Min's family sitting around the table, eating a clear, sticky paste dipped in fish sauce. The narrator recognizes this paste. It's Hodon, the cheap, homemade wheat flour glue that kids use for school crafts, or worse, that farmers use for pig feed. The narrator is disgusted. They mockingly call the food gross, and in doing so, they deeply shame Min and cause a rift in the friendship. The next morning, the narrator wakes up to find their own parents preparing the exact same dish. The father sits the narrator down and delivers a lesson that should be taught in every school in the world. He explains that whether a meal is a 5-star luxury banquet or a humble bowl of flour paste, both are, in his words, the crystallization of human sweat. He tells his child that you must look at others with an open soul. When you judge someone based on their circumstances, their poverty, or their differences, you aren't proving your superiority. You are proving your ignorance. This single experience completely removes the narrator's fear of different lifestyles. It propels them to become a volunteer in remote, impoverished areas. Armed with the realization that nothing, absolutely nothing, is foreign to the human experience. Empathy is the ability to look past the surface and see the crystallization of human sweat in everyone you meet. And speaking of seeing the value in things, how do we value our possessions? How do we value our legacy? There's a story about a grandfather who passes away, and his family finds his living will in a tin box. He leaves his large plots of land for crops, but he specifically leaves a tiny, triangular plot of land for his 8-year-old grandchild to grow tomatoes. Inspired by this profound act of bequeathing, the 8-year-old narrator starts writing their own will. They start taking their favorite toys, photos, seashells, rocks, and dried flowers, and hoarding them in boxes. They are building a physical legacy, a museum of their existence to leave behind for others. But years later, as an adult, the narrator opens their grandfather's old tin box. It's empty. And an epiphany strikes. Love is not something that can be stored in boxes. Why does this matter? Because we spend our lives hoarding. We hoard money, we hoard possessions, we hoard our affections, thinking we are saving them for a rainy day or leaving them as relics. But possessions kept as relics are utterly useless. True love, true legacy, is expressed by giving things away while you are alive. It's about sharing the joy of the object, the time, the emotion, with others right now. You cannot box up love and expect it to keep its warmth. This realization of giving love in the present is beautifully illustrated in the story of Jeff and Dr. Holstrom. Jeff is a young man who loves skiing. It is his absolute passion. But his father, Dr. Holstrom, is a cold, strict, demanding man who wants his son to follow a rigid academic path. When Jeff chooses skiing over his father's demands, the doctor disowns him. He calls him lazy. He cuts him off. The chasm between them seems unbridgeable. But Jeff doesn't let the rejection destroy him. He eventually goes to college, not to please his father, but for his own sake. He finds his own path to success. Fast forward to Jeff's graduation day. He is looking out at the crowd, and suddenly, he sees his father. Jeff's sister had secretly invited him. And the father, seeing his son standing there, successful, independent, and whole, realizes the magnitude of his own harshness. He realizes that his pride had cost him his son. In a deeply moving gesture, this strict, unyielding doctor bows to his son in apology, and opens his arms. Forgiveness, as this story teaches us, is the act of putting aside pain so you can continue living with happiness. It is the bridge between parental expectations and an individual's right to define their own success. Jeff could have held on to his bitterness, he had every right to. But remember what we talked about at the beginning? Maturity is not holding on to the persistent bitterness of a child. It is decorating your own soul with forgiveness. And sometimes the universe tests our capacity for empathy and forgiveness in the most unexpected, bizarre ways. I want to tell you a story about a calf named Cyclops. Yes, a calf. Cyclops is born on a farm, and he is severely deformed. He only has one eye in the middle of his head. He is so strange-looking that even his own mother rejects him. The humans mock him. They view him as a genetic mistake, a useless burden. But as Cyclops grows, the farmers notice something incredible. This deformed, rejected animal has an uncanny, 100% accurate ability to detect when the cows are ready for breeding. This is something the human farmers and even the bulls struggled to identify. Suddenly, the narrative shifts. The story moves from pity and disgust, to utility, and finally, to deep emotional connection. Cyclops becomes a beloved member of the farm. He befriends a chicken named Omelette. He provides warmth to the other animals in the barn. Why is a story about a one-eyed cow in this book? Because it is a profound metaphor for human value. Physical perfection does not dictate value. Society loves to discard what it deems broken or useless. But the defects of this calf did not hinder its burning desire to live, nor its ability to contribute to its community. Cyclops taught that farm family, and he teaches us, deep empathy for those who are less fortunate, those who look different, those who the world has cast aside. This theme of finding immense value in the unexpected brings us to Willard P. Franklin. Willard is a student who is a complete loner. He is emotionally walled off, impoverished, and his teacher simply cannot figure out how to reach him. He is a ghost in the classroom. Then, Christmas rolls around, and the school organizes a charity drive for underprivileged students. The teacher is asking the kids to bring in donations. And guess who is the only student who remembers to bring something? Willard. This boy, who has absolutely nothing, walks up and hands the teacher 2 25-cent coins. It was his lunch milk money. He sacrificed his own nourishment to help others. The devastating irony, which the teacher discovers later, is that Willard's own family is at the very top of the list of people who need the charity. This is the concept of the widow's mite. True generosity is never measured by the amount given, it is measured by the sacrifice involved. A billionaire giving $1 million is a rounding error. A starving boy giving his only 50 cents is a profound, earth-shattering act of moral courage. Willard's wordless voice spoke infinitely louder through his actions than any grand speech ever could. A soul filled with kindness will always shine, regardless of the broken vessel it inhabits. And as we move into the final chapters of our journey today, the themes of empathy and resilience merge into a breathtaking look at survival. I want to shift gears and talk about a red-tailed hawk named Chien. This story is incredible. A family, specifically a boy named Scott and his sister Becky, find a dying wild hawk. Its wing is severely broken. It is on the brink of death. To save it, they have to use unconventional methods. They literally force-feed it a spoonful of whiskey to shock its system back to life. It works. Scott painstakingly feeds the hawk tiny strips of meat left on the sand to aid its digestion. They build a massive, 3-meter-high open-topped enclosure to protect it from bobcats. Becky names the bird Chien, which translates to warrior or combat. Over time, this wild predator becomes almost domesticated. It plays tug-of-war with an old sock. It bonds with the kids. But here is the paradox of domestication. You can heal a wild thing, you can make it tame, but its true nature is always tied to the sky. As spring arrives, a wild female red-tailed hawk begins circling the property. Chien looks up, and something ancient wakes up inside him. He becomes deeply depressed. He stops eating. He fruitlessly beats his broken, crippled wing against the air, desperate to answer the call of the wild. And then, he does the impossible. Using only his beak and his one good claw, the crippled hawk scales the 3-meter fence and escapes into the desert. A week later he returns just briefly, sitting on a woodpile to eat from Scott's hand one last time, as if to say thank you, before vanishing into the wild with his mate. Now you would think a crippled hawk in the desert is a dead hawk. But 9 years later, the mother of the family is out in the desert investigating a report of a crippled bird. She finds him. Chien is old, scrawny, and his wing is still twisted, but he is alive. He is surviving, protected and cared for by his mate. It is a miracle. It validates the family's years of effort, but more importantly, it proves that the will to live, the burning desire to be free and true to one's nature, can overcome impossible physical limitations. And if a bird can do that, what can a human do? This brings us to our final story, the story of Jason. Jason is a 27-year-old construction worker, a guy who builds foundations out of steel and concrete for a living. Out of nowhere, he is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS. The doctor sits him down and delivers a horrific prognosis. You will soon be in a wheelchair. You will lose your vision. You will lose bladder control. Imagine being 27, in the prime of your physical life, and being told your body is about to become a prison. But Jason's primary fear isn't even for himself. His fear is failing his wife, Tracy, and his father. He feels like his foundation is crumbling. But then, Jason meets a coach named Pat. Pat is a guy who also has MS, but he has successfully managed it through an incredibly strict diet and exercise regimen. Pat looks Jason in the eye and gives him a new mantra, asterisk. You can do it, Jason. Don't give up. Asterisk. Jason realizes that in construction, foundations are made of concrete, but in life, foundations are made of family, discipline, and belief. He completely redefines his foundation. He commits to a grueling, 6-day-a-week training regimen. He decides that he is not going to let a medical prognosis dictate the terms of his existence. He uses self-discipline as medicine. He sets ambitious goals to compete, to fight back, to prove that the human spirit can defy the deterioration of the physical body. And that, my friends, is where all of these threads tie together. From the poem about maturity, to Sparky chronicling his failures, to a mother hiding her missing ears, to a one-eyed calf, to a boy giving up his milk money, to a crippled hawk surviving in the desert, and a man fighting off paralysis with sheer willpower. What is the common denominator? The internal choice. Every single one of these stories is about a moment where an individual looked at their circumstances that were often painful, unfair, or terrifying, and decided to take ownership of their response. They chose to invest in today. They chose to leave a legacy of love rather than a box of trinkets. They chose to chase the dream, to forgive the father, to see the value in the broken things, and to fight the impossible odds. So, as you go about the rest of your day, I want you to ask yourself, are you holding a hand, or are you binding a soul? Are you bankrupting your present by living in yesterday's regrets, or are you investing 100% of your capital into right now? Are you playing it safe like Jack the real estate agent, terrified of the phrase, "It might have been"? Or are you willing to leap? Life is not going to hand you fulfillment. It's not going to protect you from failure or illness or loss. But it does give you the raw materials. It gives you the wheat flour paste, the broken wings, the rejections. What you build with them is entirely up to you. Plant your own garden. Decorate your own soul. Thank you for listening. Keep chasing the meaningful life, and I'll catch you on the next episode.